Alrighty. So these are dates that are going to be important for you. It includes deadlines and it includes the payment schedule. So please make sure that you pay attention. And if you have questions at any point, just let me know. So we're gonna start officially with the summer SRI content in May. So on May 7th is gonna be the deadline for you to submit your contract, right? So you can submit it before that, but that's the deadline. Then by May 14th, you have to submit an article analysis. So everybody is required before we start doing research to do some literature reviews and get familiar with the literature within the topic that they're interested in researching, and based on the project that they have discussed with their mentors. So I want everyone to take one of those papers and read it very carefully and submit an analysis. It's a very short document, so a page will suffice, but I want to be able to see how you are analyzing that literature in the sense that you understand what the techniques are, what's the objective, and how they address the objective. And then at the end, explain how their findings and the impact of the findings, all right? So, and again, that's gonna be in May 14. Any questions with the analysis? Right. So by May 21, we need to receive your research action plan. So what is your research action plan? That is a document in which you're gonna explain to me what you and your mentor discuss on how the project is gonna be worked on. So you're gonna tell me how many weeks you expect to spend collecting data, and how many days or weeks you're going to spend with the analysis, and how much time you're spending writing, and all of those things. You also want to give me an idea of what it's involved in your project. If you need to get IRB approval, then you will have to mention it there, and kind of set a timeline for the work and the nature, and describe a little bit the nature of the work itself, whether it's going to be through surveys or going to a lab or whatever it is. The next, so that's going to be again for May 21st. And then by June 4th, we need to have your proposal submitted. So the proposal is what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be discussing what's needed for the proposal. And this is a document that is going to take you quite some time to complete, so we're giving you the most time. So you have from now until June 4th to work on it. And it is very important because I need to make sure that what you are telling me that you are planning on working on is doable, is feasible, and you can complete it within the 8 weeks of the SRI. And the actual research project and the timing for the projects won't start until I get that proposal and I approve it. So I need to make sure that you submit it by June 4th. All right, and then that means that by June 7th, I should be, I'll be very quick at reviewing everything. And by June 7th, you should be able to start working at the Summer Research Institute. All right, so that's your official date when you start tracking your hours and you start working with your mentors towards collecting data, analyzing data, whatever it is that your project will consist of. And then if at any point during your research you need to buy some materials or some supplies, you let me know and you can submit an SRI supply form, and we will purchase those up to a certain amount, which at this moment is $125 total for supplies. Every week you have to turn a form. During the summer, you have to turn a form that says what did you accomplish that by the end of the week. All right. And then every other week, so every 2 weeks, you need to submit a form that lists your hours and how you have moved your project within those last 2 weeks. So it works basically like an hour journal and also a progress report. Any questions regarding those two documents? All right. So that's gonna take place, like I said, either weekly or every 2 weeks until the end of the SRI, which will officially be on July 30th. So that will be your last day where you log in your hours. At the end of that day, we need to have an abstract, which is a scientific description of your project. We'll teach you how to write it through the summer, but that will be the deadline for that abstract. Then oops, well, we'll go about that in a sec. Then on August 6th, so a week after you're done conducting the research, you will have to submit the paper that you have written based on the research that you conducted. You would also submit a research poster that is going to be used for presentations at a later date, which is very likely to be in September. All right, that paper is very comprehensive. It's fairly long, and it will require a lot of components. So you need to make sure that you are on top of that document and that you plan to give yourself enough time to complete it. So again, the deadline for those two, the paper and the posters, will be August 6th. Any questions with any of these documents or the timeline? All right. So now let's talk about the payment schedule. So the payment is going to be linked to all of those documents that I described, and you're going to get paid once you fulfill each one of those requirements. So the first payment, we're going to pay it once we receive your signed contract. So that will be a $200 payment in oops, sorry, payment by May 7th. Then you're gonna you're gonna get your second payment after you submit the article analysis, and your third payment when you submit your action plan. Then once we get your proposal, we can disperse the fourth payment. And then every time you turn your hours, so every 2 weeks, we will be paying for your, payment your stipend. So that goes through the end of the SRI, with the last payment being after July 30th, right? And then your final payment is going to be after you submit your paper. So when you submit your paper, that's the maximum amount you will get, the $600. But if you are late at submitting the paper, so if you submit your paper after August 6th, we're gonna discount $50 for every week that your paper and poster are late, right? Any questions about that? All right. So all the documents are gonna be submitted via Microsoft Teams. And what we do is that we are gonna set up a class, and within that class, you get the option, you're gonna get assignments by week. And those assignments will be these documents that I have described. And you'll be able to upload them, and you'll see when I see them, and you'll see the feedback that I give you from those documents. Right? Well, before I go to Teams, any questions about any of this? Right. So I mentioned Microsoft Teams. I want to make sure that we are on the same page with it. So how many of you have used Microsoft Teams before? All right, cool. So what we'll do is that I'm going to send you a document on how to use it because it's very important for us to use Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is not fun and it's it's not the it does a lot of things. It's not the best at doing any of those things, but it allows us to do keep certain level of organization, and it allows us to track your documents much better, so we can make sure that we pay you on time. So that's one of the main reasons we use it. And we use it for other things. We use it for quick visits. So I'm always logged in to Microsoft Teams, and if you do log in and you see that I'm available, so I have like a green dot next to my name, that means that it's like my office door being open. So at any point you can just jump in and send me a message, and I will respond within the next, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. Usually it's way less than that, but it works like having office hours. You can ask questions, and if it's something that requires much more interaction, then we can just turn on the voice and have a voice call or a video call, whichever. Like I mentioned before, that's how you upload your documents. And most of the seminars and workshops we don't do through Zoom. We actually do them through Microsoft Teams. So you will get a link to your email, and you can actually click the link and join in to the meetings. All right. And since I see that about half of you are not familiar with Teams, we're going to send you a booklet that kind of explain how to use Microsoft Teams. And they will have instructions on how to connect, how to download the app, and just the general usage. It's very simple once you get started. It's just that I know it's annoying that it's something else that you have to use when there's so many other platforms that you have to deal with for your classes, but it certainly will make your life much easier once you start using it, especially when it comes to McNair and specifically the Summer Research Institute. All right, any questions so far with either dates, teams, payments? All right. So let's talk about the proposal then. So I'm just going to be talking about several parts about the proposal. I want to talk about what is the purpose of writing a proposal, how to write it, well, how to get into the mindset of writing it, and how important it is to read the literature before you get started. Then I'm going to talk about the individual components of the research proposal and what goes in each one of them. And at the end, we're going to go through a review. All right. So the first thing is that a research proposal is a document that is used to convince whoever has the power to greenlight your project that you have an idea that is worth exploring and a plan that is achievable. So that's a document that is often submitted to an institutional review board, the IRB, which are the people who decide whether or determine if what you're planning is ethical. It could be for a thesis committee once you're in grad school, or it could be to submit to grant funding agencies to get funding. And that's going to be important whether you are establishing your own lab, or whether you have a project that you want to work on and have to request funds, or even if you have work on a nonprofit, those will be ways of getting resources in. So that's why it's very useful to already know how to write these proposals. And again, the point of it is making sure that you describe that is something that is important to address and something that can be done within the time frame that you have. In a proposal, you are going to demonstrate that you understand what you're talking about. So you truly know the topic that you're going to be working on, and you are able to understand what is actually already known about that, and at the same time determine what is missing, because what's missing is what you are supposed to be working on. All right. And finally, through the proposal, you're actually proposing a study that is designed to address that lack of knowledge in a particular area of the field. all right? Um, that means that you're conveying to the person who reads the review or the person who gets to approve your study that you are the right person to conduct the study, that you have the tools necessary to complete and analyze the study, and that it can be done within the allocated time and the allocated budget. Any questions so far? I'm going to ask you a lot of times if you have questions because there is a lot of information on this PowerPoint and it will be easy to get lost as I go along, especially because I ramble. All right. So you must be very organized before writing your research proposal. First, you have to decide what topic you want to study. Most subjects are way too broad. So you have to be very mindful of that and be very specific. You have to be intentional and you have to be very narrow on your interest. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through this presentation. But keep in mind, again, a study is very focused. So you're addressing basically one or two things within that study. And you also have to identify the resources that you will need to conduct your study. So that's collecting the librarian's contact information, making sure that you have access to scientific journals, making sure that you have and you know how to use reference manager software. And I'm going to talk more about that later. Oops. And you want to make sure that you and your mentor are having conversations about the project and that you're getting feedback because your mentor has done these things and they know if what you're thinking about doing is actually doable within 8 weeks, which is what we have to complete these studies. All right. So you start your proposal by doing a literature review. This is crucial. You cannot write a good proposal without understanding what you're studying. So you need to read papers about what you want to work on. Reading a chapter in a book is not going to cut it. You have to go to primary literature and understand the experiments that are being done. A literature review consists of reading academic articles on your specific topic. So I'm going to start an example that I'm going to carry through the rest of the presentation. Let's say that you're interested in studying the PhD attainment by first-gen college students. So the first part of your proposal writing would be to start reading literature about first-generation college students and see how many of them go to grad school, how they complete their projects, oops, and the barriers that they may face. All right. So you need to know what you're interested in, and you need to figure out what is known about that at the moment. Before I move on, any questions so far? All right. So while you're reading, it is important that you do active reading. You have to take notes as you read. You have to pay attention to the techniques that are used in the experiments that you are reading about, because what they do is what you might be able to do as well, because you're doing a different topic, but techniques can be fairly similar across the field. So if you know that they did a survey, then you get an idea that you could do a survey. If they do a focus group, then you know that you could do a focus group. If they analyze tons of papers, you know that that's a possibility as well as a way to extract even more knowledge. All right. Oh, this keeps moving, so sorry. Then you need to be able to highlight relevant findings so you can actually cite them as you write. Um, and then the other thing is, I mentioned this, the reference software to collect references. I'll keep talking about this, but the reason that I am bringing it up is because it is way easier if you have a software that keeps track of your references, because then you can insert them into your text as you write, and that keeps you organized, and then you don't have to remember where things were. And most importantly, you can change format So if you need APA style or whichever other referencing style, you can actually switch it with the software, and it keeps you organized, and you make sure that it's completely that is correctly cited. All right. So the other thing that you want to do is organize your thought as you conduct your literature review. I personally like making diagrams, and just like word, circle, arrow, to just sort of make like a flow chart or something of the sort, to make sure that you start visualizing all your ideas and how they connect. It's an easy way of staying organized and to letting your ideas flow. I know a lot of people will immediately think that they don't need to do that. I think all the time that I don't need to do it, but the moment I do it, it helps. So please keep that in mind and give it a try. And I guarantee that it's going to help you move your ideas forward. Make sure that you keep track of what's unknown. So if, again, my hypothetical analysis, if I'm thinking about first-gen students and how they get PhD degrees, I start reading the papers and I see, oh, they keep talking about this type of people. They keep talking about people under these circumstances. It seems like they don't talk about this other group as much as they talk about, uh, I don't know, the one that keeps being mentioned. So that kind of gives you ideas of what's missing, all right? And once you identify that, then you can start formulating questions to address that lack of knowledge. And also, of course, solutions to fill the gap in knowledge. So once you know what's missing, you need to create a hypothesis, and you need to create a plan to test that hypothesis. So it's very important that you figure out if you have the tools to answer that. Because if you come up with a question and your plan is to create a survey with 10,000 people, that's not going to be possible for you. You also don't have the money to pay a team of people to come to campus and do an in-person study. So you have to know what your limitations are and see how you can get this done, right? And then you have to remember to be specific and never be general. That is something that is going to be crucial moving forward in your career. You have to be specific. You don't talk about students. You talk about first generation students who want to get a PhD and who want to move on to do whatever it is. You have to constantly narrow what you're saying and narrow what you mean. All right, so that's all related to reading the literature. Again, let's go back to my example. Let's say that when you read the literature, you see that first generation students are is the focus in the literature is for first gen students in general. But you notice that there is very little known about the experience of first generation students who come from immigrant families or that come from underrepresented minorities. So one idea would be to focus your project on studying PhD attainment of first generation college students that come from immigrant families, and then compare that to the experience of the ones from the general population. All right. Any questions before I move on? So let's talk about the proposal itself. Oh, that's me again. I recorded before. That's why the presentation keeps moving. So any questions so far? No? Okay. So so to start writing the proposal, so that was all before starting. Now it's once you are actually writing. The first thing that you have to do is make sure that you keep your audience in mind. So as you start writing, make sure that you're clear and that you use proper terminology. Please avoid using jargon like there's no tomorrow. Make sure that everything you say is very, very clear and that is explained. And make sure that with everything you write, you're providing enough information for the reader, which will be the person who will approve your study, to understand not only the project, but the potential impact of your project, all right? Keep in mind, this is important, that you are writing a scientific proposal. This is a scientific document, and there is no room for emotional arguments or for feelings. What I mean by that is that you need to make sure that when you describe things, you just say what they are. You don't add describers to the facts. So you don't say, oh, this is unfair because X or Y. You want to say what it is and the potential impact, but not add additional descriptors to the facts. All right. Um, Again, you have to rely on those facts to illustrate your reasoning, and you need to make scientific arguments to make your case. All right. It is okay to be passionate, but you have to be in this once you're doing dealing with scientific documents, your passion has to be moved by the facts that you're saying. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So the proposal will have four main sections. You're going to have an introduction, you're going to have an approach section, and you have going to have a conclusion. Then at the very end, you're just going to have your bibliography. Before I go there, there's different components that each part has to have, and I'm going to go into those as we move along. So let's start with the introduction. The goal of the introduction is to make sure that you familiarize the reader, again, the person who approves your study, with the topic. And you want to do that because you need to be able, that person needs to be able to understand, so they can actually follow what you're saying, and they can understand the impact that your project will have. All right. So as part of that, you need to make sure that you provide enough information and that you actually mention what's the gap in the knowledge. People need to know what's already known, but what's missing from that collection of knowledge. And then you need to make sure that you tell them how what you're working on, how your research actually fits into the field and how it addresses something that's missing. I know I keep saying those same words, but I truly want to emphasize that your goal is to say, this is what's known, this is what's still unknown, and I'm gonna figure it out. All right. And then you have to make sure that you convince people that you're the right person. And you do that by citing literature. That's the point. You don't have to say, I'm the right person to do this. What you have to say is describe it in terms that it shows that you understand what you're doing. All right, as you write the introduction, make sure that you state the purpose of the proposal. You want to say what your question is. You want to say why is important to learn what you are working on. And you want to say why it's going to be useful to know that. All right. Through the process, you're going to cite published resources. And that's going to be about, this introduction is going to be about, I don't know, maybe 2 to 4 paragraphs. And at the end, at the very end, you're going to state what your aims are. You're going to say, aim, like just like it's written here, aim to compare, in our example, it's going to be to compare PhD attachment rates between first generation students from immigrant backgrounds to those of the general population. So if I have to go back to your document and I just can't remember what it is, I can just go to that last sentence that says aim and read it. All right. Any questions with the introduction? All right. So the next section will be the approach. And that's the part where you describe your goals and how you will pursue them. So the first thing that you do when you write this section is to reiterate your aims. Then you state your hypothesis and you start describing your approach. So by that, you're going to start saying how you're going to conduct the research, and you're going to provide the experimental design. So going back to our example, if I'm interested in knowing the experience between, the differences in experiences between uh, first gen students from the general population versus the ones who come from immigrant backgrounds, then I would have to say that that's what I'm interested in, and that I'm gonna do it by conducting a survey of 100 students. And once I'm gonna ask X, Y, and Z questions, and then I'm gonna analyze the responses of the first-gen students who come from immigrant families and compare them to the general population. I'm gonna make a statistical analysis of the differences, and that's gonna be my methodology. All right. You also wanna say, if I just mentioned statistical analysis, if you do, or if you do anything else that requires software to analyze, then you're gonna say what software you use. You're gonna, in my example, I use 100, so you need 100 respondents. So you wanna make sure that you mention your sample size and whether that's okay to make conclusions. So your mentor should be able to guide you with that, right? So you're not required to, but you're welcome to use figures from a paper to illustrate a point that you're making during your proposal. So if you think a paper has a flow chart that shows what it is, then you can, copy and, with, having references attached to it, okay? So these, let's see. Yeah, so this section, the approach section, is gonna take you between 3 to, I want to say, 8 paragraphs or so. That's probably will be enough, and it's gonna be so it's not too long, but it's gonna be concise. So uh, I keep saying be specific and not general, which means that even 8 paragraphs of being very specific is going to be quite a bit of work, because we don't want any fluff. We just want to make sure that you describe exactly what you're doing and where you're gonna and how it's gonna work and all of that. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So conclusion. So the conclusion is your time and your chance to bring uh, to make sure that you summarize things and that you truly bring home the message for the reader. So you wanna, yes, you wanna summarize the proposal, but you wanna do it by reinstating your hypotheses, give a very brief summary of the methodology, and then most importantly, you want to describe what can be learned from conducting the research. So during the approach, it's all about how to conduct and analyze the research. Now, during the conclusion, is your chance to emphasize the benefits of conducting the research. How is this going to impact uh, the world moving forward, so to speak? All right. So it's really important that you connect the dots for people here. It's like, oh, it's if learning about uh, going back to our example, learning from the experiences of first gen students from coming from immigrant families who want to conduct uh, joint PhD degrees will allow us to better serve them, provide services, blah, 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 blah. All right. So you should be able to connect the importance of your research with what you are planning to do. Any questions with the conclusion? All right. So finally, it's going to be your bibliography. And your bibliography is a document, it's the part of the document where you cite, where you list the papers that you have cited through the proposal. So this is not a discussion of the literature. That has basically been done through the process of writing your proposal, right? So every time you describe a method, you can cite somebody who has used it successfully and say why it worked. So during the bibliography, you're just gonna list the papers that you cited. So make sure that you only include the ones that you actually cited in your document. So if you read the paper but you did not talk about the paper, don't cite it. I mean, don't put it on this list. All right, and it has to be properly formatted. So I'm going to suggest people who are in the social sciences use APA, and people who are in natural sciences use what's called Cell format, so what the journal Cell uses, unless your mentor tells you otherwise. If your mentor is much more used to something else and they suggest it because that's common in your particular area where you would normally publish, then that's okay. Make sure that you properly cite where your ideas come from, and make sure that everything is, again, documented. So I personally will encourage you to use a reference software uh, manager to keep track of your references. I will suggest that you use Zotero because it's free and it's easy. We have guides on the library's website on how to use it. The librarians would be more than happy to help you understand how the software works. I We had a workshop last summer about it, and we'll probably will have it again to make sure that you can use it for your paper. But in the meantime, I'm gonna see and try to find if there's a recording of that. I don't think so though, but if there is, I'll send it to you. Um, you can also ask the librarian to help you find articles if you don't feel comfortable doing finding them on your own. If you don't know how to look for them, the librarians will be more than happy to help you. And I'll send you I'm gonna send you a follow-up email with other things, and in it I will include the librarians that we normally work with, so you have somebody to reach directly to, and you don't have to randomly find librarians on your own. Um, Again, using a reference manager is going to help you when you write your paper, and in your future career is going to make your life so much easier. I don't think this is terrible, but I don't think I can even remember how to format things on my own anymore, because I rely on those software to just like have the proper format for my papers, right? So going back, oops, again, I have recordings of this too, so there's some voice under some slides. Um, when it's time to review what you wrote, make sure that you do it carefully. Make sure that you use citations through your document. Make sure that you do it properly and that you give credit to whoever came with the ideas that you're exploring. Make sure that if you use a figure that you cited, if you discuss an idea that's in the field, that you say who came up with it, because otherwise you're plagiarizing. So make sure that you cite. Again, make sure that you don't use jargon. Sometimes that's very common in the field, but when you write a proposal, the person who is evaluating the proposal, which in this case will be me, um, may not be familiar with the topic, so it's going to fly over my bald head. So make sure that you describe what you mean and that you are very clear. If you need to use the jargon, because it's basically the only word that's used for that, make sure that you explain what it is. And if it's no acronyms without explaining what it is first. You have to at least write spell it out at least once before you write it. Please avoid. This is like one of the things that I have. I have returned to people papers for the most. Avoid using cliches when you write. Do not use non-scientific expressions. So you don't want to say anything like thinking outside the box, or anything that is a phrase that is just like a phrase. You don't want to have that on a scientific document. So make sure that you avoid using that as you write your proposal. And finally, make sure that you proofread as much as possible. When you're tired of proofreading, put it through Grammarly. And when Grammarly is done, you give it to someone to read, whatever it is, to make sure that you don't have mistakes. But importantly, you don't want to have, you have to pay a special attention um, to problems of logic. So you don't want to say something like the sky is blue is happy, because there's no connection between the sky being blue and you being happy. If you don't tell me a logical progression, you have to tell me sunny days make me happy. Today, the sky is blue and it's sunny. Therefore, I'm happy. So you have to truly make sure that the logic of your sentences carry through what you're saying, right? All right. Summary. The goal of your proposal is to convince the reader that you have the knowledge and the resources to complete a research study in a particular time and with a particular budget. You need to make sure that you conduct a literature review first before even grabbing a piece of paper to write on, to make sure that you understand the field and that you are able to find a particular area where there's a gap in knowledge that you can fill in with your project. Your project should be narrow and very specific. It should follow, you should follow the guidelines to complete the parts of the proposal, uh, which are the introduction, the approach, the conclusion, and the bibliography. And then make sure that you have enough time to proofread and don't have grammatical, logical, or formatting mistakes. So that's about it. I want to make sure that you email me if you have any additional questions. If there's parts that you don't understand, make sure that you set up um, a meeting with me and we can talk about it and figure it out. Next month, Dr. Roled is gonna talk to you about research methods. So I wanted to talk to you about the proposal beforehand. So if you have any questions when she talks, then you can also take advantage of her expertise to ask her those questions, and also to give you some of the terminology that she may use, so you are within the same train of thought, I guess. And I will also email you a booklet, which is basically the information on this presentation on a kind of guide format, to make sure that you can refer to it as you write, because I know that there's a lot of it here and you may not remember all of it when it's time to write. So I want to make sure that you have that and that you have some additional information, especially when it comes to the length of the documents. So make sure that you know that is again a few, like between 2 and 4 paragraphs of the introduction, about the same for the approach. Conclusion can be a little bit short. It could be between 2 and 4 if you feel very excited. And then your bibliography. All right. So I'm going to send that by Monday because I have to. I already have a very good draft, but I want to make sure that if there's any additional questions from you guys, I can address them and incorporate them into that document. All right. That's about it for the presentation itself. Any questions regarding the time frame for the research, the payment schedule, or the proposal?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So, what if like I'm struggling on maybe like finding a topic I want to research?
Mhm. Good. So if you are, there's a few things that you can do. The first thing that you should be doing is, I know that I still have to talk to a lot of you one-on-one. So I'm just going to give a general answer in case we haven't talked just yet. The first thing that you should do is talk to your mentor. So we need to make sure that you have a mentor by the end of this month, so you can start having these conversations with them. And ideally, what you would do is that, let's say that you are interested in something in let's say um, brain injuries, random. Let's say you're interested in that. What you would do is to start reading, make a quick search to see what's known about it, and then unfortunately that's going to be a little bit more labor intensive because you have to make sure that you start understanding what's already discovered so you know what's undiscovered. Does that make sense? Because it's a
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. So the easiest way would be to talk to a mentor, so the mentor can pre-narrow that for you, and
Okay.
then, and then you can go from there. Because otherwise, it's going to be a long, long.
Yeah.
Because you are, you're all starting the process of doing research, so you already there's a lot out there, and you will benefit from somebody kind of narrowing down for you and give you
Hmm.
nudges and ideas, um, because otherwise it can be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you.
Mhm. Any more questions?
I have a question.
Hmm.
Okay, so are we supposed to be like coming up with an idea all on our like not all on our own, obviously with help of the mentor, but like any idea? Or are we supposed to be like working with what the mentor's already doing research on, or what?
All right, so that's a great question. So a lot of the mentors are gonna be working on something already. So if they have a lab, it is uh, it is perfectly okay to get a slice of what they're doing and then just work on that. So you can ask them, what are you working on right now? What could I contribute to that? And if they tell you, oh, you can just work on this particular mini study that I'm doing, or you can help analyzing this data, whatever it is, you can then join the research team and work with them with what they're doing instead of creating something from scratch. Does that make sense?
So we can join their current research team, and then
Mhm.
do we just like write on a smaller portion of their big research?
Well, it is quite possible that you would just be giving tasks to do or like a few things to do. So you would have to describe it, and you don't have to create a new mini project from that, but you have to be able to tell me what it is that you'll be doing. So you should be able to describe to me the topic and basically the same things that I described in the presentation. I know that you're not going to be starting from scratch, but you should still be able to say, oh, I'm going to be working on this topic and we're interested in this. And it's important that we do it because of this. And this is how we're going to be doing it. Even if it started already, it's important that you tell me like what goes before starting, even though the project may have already been started and you are doing part B and part C. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And those of you who don't have mentors just yet, it's important that we talk, maybe schedule a meeting with me by next week. I'm available today, tomorrow, and many times next week. So we can discuss mentors. And if you don't have one, we can uh, find a way to connect you with someone so you can start getting the ideas. Because like I said at the very beginning, you're gonna have to have a good idea so you can start coming up with these documents by May. All right. Any more questions?
Yes, you probably already said this, but I was gonna ask if these slides are gonna be in Microsoft Office or not.
This, you mean the ones for the
The,
presentations?
yeah, the presentation, PowerPoint.
Uh, I can do that. I mean, I'll do that if you guys want the presentation. But I think it will be much more useful the guide version. So I'll send you the Word version of the content. So it's a little bit easier to follow, and you can keep it with you as you write. Is that okay?
You said the Word version.
Yeah, it's pretty much the
Uh,
same, except that you don't have like the outline and you don't have like the thank you.
oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, it also removes some of the images. Um, any additional questions? All right, cool. So I'm gonna then work on those, incorporate your questions into the guide, so I can add, about, whether you already, if you already joined someone's lab and all of those other things that we talked about. And I will send it by Monday. I will also include a little note with the length of each section, so you have an idea of how much to write. And there's something else that I'm supposed to send you. Well, I think that's about it. Oh, and I'll make sure that I also include the deadlines and the payment schedule. All right, cool, awesome. So if that's all, then thank you for joining us. Before I go, one last thing. I'm gonna stop recording because it's not important for the presentation. Let me stop.